Good evening. You're on the smoking section, and tonight we have Keldin back with us, Keldin Sergheyev. Keldin, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be back. Happy Halloween, Stephen.
Likewise, I was going to get something to wear, but I decided not to. And are you doing anything for Halloween?
Nothing tonight.
Nothing?
I'm on the show. I mean, I guess
Yes.
that's something.
Oh, something a little bit exciting, I guess.
Yeah.
But we were going to talk about polonium-210.
Yeah. Maybe
And
as part of a two-part series on
yes,
polonium-210.
let's start the series as a two-part series because I wanted to read this article that Michael McFadden had written about it. But let me give you what is interesting to us about polonium-210, and then I'll turn the conversation over to you for. Oh, great tie, by the way.
No, thank you.
Can the viewers, do you think, see that or not?
Oh. Here, viewers, call in to
Can they?
compliment
Yes,
my tie.
can they see it? I didn't see it because I didn't have my glasses on
It's
before.
the only Halloween paraphernalia I own.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
But the genesis of our interest as tobacco rights advocates is that I guess there has been accusations that smoking and that tobacco that smokers are exposed to polonium-210 from
Right.
tobacco,
Which is true.
and that people who suffer are people who are exposed to secondhand smoke are exposed to polonium-210,
Right.
and that people who are exposed to third-hand smoke likewise are exposed.
Right. I know you take a particular issue with the third-hand smoke, but
Well, okay, so, and every time there is a news article about polonium-210
yeah,
and its relationship with tobacco, generally speaking, it's mentioned in the news article that a former KGB agent was
Yep.
killed with polonium-210. So
yeah,
those are
Alexander Litvinenko.
brought together into the
Yeah.
public's mind.
Right.
And recently, someone I know who is an interesting person and kind of an open-minded person saw something on the web saying that smokers' lungs are the most radioactive place on Earth because of smokers' exposure to polonium-210. So that's the genesis of our interest. What?
What do I have to say about that?
Yeah. Have I
Well,
given you
first
any?
of all, for the viewers that don't know me, my name is Keldin Sergheyev, and my background is in nuclear engineering and a little bit bioinformatics. But I'm I can't claim to be any kind of medical specialist.
Right.
But I would like to think of myself as a strong advocate of the scientific method. So I see my role on this show as sort of a interpreter of the scientific method, an advocate of the scientific method, and maybe someone here to help understand the studies and the p-tests, the p-values, and the hypothesis testing.
Okay.
But
Well,
anyway,
what is the p-value? You want to talk
no,
about that?
I
now
don't
or
want to.
later?
I don't want to
Yes,
talk about that
right.
right now, but I'm sure it'll come up at some point. So that's for those who don't know me. Now, let me say a bit about polonium-210.
I didn't even introduce you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well,
I
it's
just said
it's been a
Keldin
while,
Sergheyev.
and I'm sure
Okay.
your one or two viewers probably remember.
I think
One or two
thousands
thousand
of viewers, and
yeah.
of course a few.
So polonium-210 is a isotope of polonium, often confused with plutonium, but it's actually a different element on the periodic table. It is just two more protons than lead, so it's lead, bismuth, polonium, and polonium has no stable isotopes. All of them are radioactive.
Oh, really?
Yep. It decays by alpha emission, which is essentially a helium nucleus. Its alpha decay is very energetic, but it doesn't travel very far. It can be stopped by basically anything, including your skin. You can hold alpha emitters in your hand very safely. However, alpha emitters are really only dangerous if you ingest them. And polonium, along with
So polonium is an alpha emitter.
that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So, the ABCs of ionizing radiation. There's alpha emission, beta, gamma, proton, neutron.
And is there any significant difference between, let's say, alpha emitters and gamma emitters?
Oh, absolutely. And this is one of the most important things when it comes to judging what the consequence is of a dose that you receive over and above how much energy is included in the radiation emitted, which is that different particles, because of their properties, travel a different distance and cause different things to happen in the medium that they're traveling through. So for instance, beta particles travel a little bit farther than alpha particles because they're smaller,
Yeah.
and their energy is lost over many more interactions. They get further into the material before they stop. Neutrons are neutral, so they travel through materials almost as ghosts and have very few interactions, usually with smaller particles where they just release all of their energy. So this is important because it means that an alpha particle won't get very far in the medium, but where it does get, it drops all of its energy. So while a beta particle, you need something like aluminum to stop, or a gamma, you need some lead or concrete. With an alpha particle, you can stop it with your skin. So usually alpha is the one you ignore. It's usually the one that you consider safe. If you wash your hands,
Alpha,
it's fine.
so polonium-210, because it's an alpha emitter,
Yes,
means
it
that
matters that you ingest it.
so that in the long range type of thing, it's one of the least dangerous radioactive isotopes.
Sure, standing next to a tobacco plant, you get essentially no harmful dose of radiation from the polonium in the tobacco. And you can handle tobacco all day long and you're not ingesting any
Were you
polonium.
familiar with this idea that tobacco contains polonium-210 before we started talking about this?
Yes, because it's sort of like one of these little trivia type things that you're taught when you're trying to
I see.
learn a little something about everything. It's sort of like, in elementary school, you're
But
given
do we know how many other plants contain polonium-210? I mean, yes, tobacco contains polonium-210, but
I don't know
I mean, because
what other
I mean, this is a trick that is
Yeah.
used by anti-smokers a lot. For example, they will say, "Did you know that there is arsenic in tobacco?"
Yeah.
And of course, people shudder when they hear that, but they of course don't realize that there is arsenic in almost every
Apple seeds.
food and water and the air.
Yeah.
And so it's a trick. So your professor said, "Well, did you know that tobacco has polonium-210?" Well, maybe tobacco has polonium too, but maybe every vegetable has, or every vegetable matter has it.
It could be.
Yes.
It could be.
So we're not sure on that issue.
We're
at that
not.
point.
We are not sure on that, and I'm not here to spread.
But it's a
fear
way,
of polonium,
I don't want to question the scientific method, but it is a way that the public can be misled, which is not necessarily untruthful.
Right.
For
Right.
example, tobacco also has formaldehyde.
Right.
And very often they say, and people say, wow, that's terrible. But I've also read medical professionals say that formaldehyde is a naturally occurring substance within the human body.
Yeah, and it's also in things like fruit juice and so on. So,
Right.
yeah, no, and I think probably if there's one consistent theme in my presence on this show, it's to remind people that things are no longer black and white. Things are a matter of degree and concentration and dose.
The dose makes the poison, so to speak. But
Yeah.
so we don't know. Tobacco does have polonium-210, but of course we don't know if every other plant does. But continue.
Right. So it's brought up as sort of an interesting thing that, polonium-210 is absorbed more readily by roots of the tobacco plant along with lead.
The tobacco plant absorbs lead.
Yes.
Of course, then we don't know what other thousands of plants also do, but
Yeah.
we don't know they don't.
Right.
I
So
just don't know. We're woefully deficient in the facts here.
right. So it preferentially absorbs some of these heavy metals, and so that's sort of brought up as an interesting piece of trivia when discussing polonium, which is not really a well-known isotope otherwise, except for really these two pieces of trivia. One, that it can be found in tobacco, and the second, that it is sometimes used for assassinations.
How often?
Yet at very, very different doses, which, is the essence of the McFadden article, right?
Yes.
But, which we'll come back to, I'm sure.
Well, we
part
may
two.
come back down to part 2 of polonium.
Yeah, part
because
2.
his article also gets into some other things that are very interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, the point I was just trying to make is that the reason we care about polonium-210 at all is that in this very specific instance, either putting it into a ex-KGB officer's tea
Yeah.
or into a cigarette is really the only time that it is harmful, is if you put it into your body, and then those alpha particles, and then that alpha emitter, when it emits the alpha particles and they don't travel very far, it doesn't matter that they don't travel very far, they're hitting something important because they're already inside
Can
of
you think of any reason this was used to assassinate this particular individual?
Well, it's certainly not something that they're going to pick up on in triage. It's a very, very
At your
unusual.
general hospital.
Yeah, it's extremely unusual way to kill someone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so
But they
unusual.
did pick it up. They did pick it
Eventually,
up.
they figured out that this guy had acute radiation poisoning. Which, by the way, ingesting any of these heavy metals is bad for you chemically. Like, separate from the radioactive risk, chemically, they're bad for you, right?
Yes.
Because they're heavy metals and they undergo all kinds of chemical reactions that are bad for you. But yeah, so Alexander Litvinenko showed signs of acute radiation poisoning, and somebody was able to figure it out amazingly. I mean, I don't even know if doctors are trained to identify acute radiation.
If it's true that he was poisoned by polonium-210, which
Right.
I will say probably was, but I don't know. I mean,
Well, so it's kind of a form of intimidation on the part of governments, right? Because basically only governments and well-funded organizations would really have access to polonium-210
yeah.
in such quantities. It's not just something you can order off the internet. I mean, it would take, you could probably distill it from something or other, but it's well beyond anyone's capacity to do it.
So you think they may
in
have
garage.
used it for the kind of propaganda?
They want to send a message.
Is that right?
They want to send a message with while simultaneously being untraceable. It's a smoking gun with no shooter. It's sort of like it sends the message. If you receive this poisoning and your doctor says, "Oh, it's polonium-210," you know who did it.
The
you know who
Russians.
your enemies
The
are.
Russians.
Yes.
I don't remember when this took
Or
place.
what
haven't-
other
How long ago did
big
this take
government?
place? Do you
Was
remember?
it 2012, 2013? I should know this, honestly. Forgive me for
But
not
it's
remembering, but-
after the fall of the Soviet Union.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, it's long. It's recent enough that I remember it.
Yes.
We'll put it that
okay.
way.
And Keldin is 28 years old, so I'm trying to think. Keldin does not remember. You were not alive at the time of the Soviet Union.
Actually, the final Congress of the Soviets that convened, that eventually dissolved the Soviet Union, convened on my birthday.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
oh
so
dear, isn't that something?
I have no living memory of the Soviet Union, but anyway, you can't say with certainty who is responsible for the polonium-210 because you would have to resort to something like fingerprints or something.
Well,
There's
given
nothing
the-
chemically or isotopically that would distinguish it from any other polonium-210 that could come from any other government.
But of course, this is the smoking section. So, given the information that you have thus far,
Yeah.
which is not a great deal of information, I don't think either of us has read Michael McFadden's. Well, there was two things. The thing I gave you was simply a comment that he wrote on some article.
Which was great.
You really liked it?
Yeah, I liked it.
Well, Michael McFadden often watches the show,
Hi, Michael.
but I don't think he's watching
Thanks
tonight
for your
because
comments.
he emailed me and said he may not be watching.
Oh, that's really
But,
a shame.
I mean,
He's missing out on my Halloween
Well,
tie.
he may watch it, your Halloween tie.
Yeah, my
That's pretty amazing. Thank you for wearing that, really.
Yeah, I gotta
but-
keep the viewers entertained.
I mean, Michael would have really been, he probably will watch it,
okay.
I mean, at some point.
Yeah, and he's gonna
Because,
regret that he didn't call
As you
in
know, my colleague Emily puts it up on the internet.
on the interwebs. Yeah.
On the internet.
Yeah.
So,
Very
but,
nice.
Okay, the point, my point.
Shout out to Emily and
Emily,
much
yes, if
gratitude
Emily
for all
watches
of
it,
her
if
work.
she watches the show, yeah. So the real question I have then is, well, can you opine at all? I mean, Michael McFadden alleges, and I think backs up with excellent arguments, that this is being used by anti-smokers, some of whom are medical doctors and researchers,
Right.
et cetera, in a very unscrupulous way, because they know that they're putting a fear into the public that really shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Now, can you agree with that? Can you agree with that from given the information you have? Let's see, we've got a phone call.
Okay, yeah. I would
Let's see
love to
who
hear
this
it all.
is. Okay, let's give it a try. You're on the smoking section with Keldin Sergheyev and Stephen Helfer. Are you still there? No, evidently not. Okay, so there's the
Oh,
let's see
they're
what
trying
happens
again.
here. You're on the smoking section. Can you hear us?
Hello, Steve. Yes, I can hear you.
Michael McFadden.
Ah,
The one and only Michael McFadden, Keldin Sergheyev. Keldin is I would say you were close to a nuclear expert, would you say? No?
I hesitate to say that, but my background is in nuclear
And
engineering.
Michael is a anti-smoking, pro smokers' rights advocate and very... Michael,
Yes, I'm here.
talk to Keldin.
Hello, Kevin. You've been doing very well.
Keldin.
Kelvin.
Keldin, D, Keldin.
Thank you, Stephen.
And, well, one quick thing from the beginning that I wanted to add. When you were talking about arsenic,
Yes.
the figure on arsenic, it is true. If you are in a bar where people are smoking, you are going to be absorbing arsenic.
Okay.
And if you sit in that bar for 165,000 hours in a smoky bar, you will get the same amount of arsenic that you would in one glass, government-approved as safe tap water.
Is that right?
Yes, you'd have to drink 165,000 glasses of tap water. You'd have to be exposed to 165,000 hours of a smoky bar to get what you would ordinarily get in a glass of tap water.
Yeah, and usually they close at midnight or 2 a.m., so it's really not feasible.
It would be hard to get your hours in.
Yeah.
And what about, Michael, what about for...
Really small.
What about for...
Ridiculous. They play the same game with the polonium, as I'm sure you will get into discussing it a little bit.
Listen, I want to...
The amount is so small that it's simply ridiculous.
I want to go on the record as saying I really can't tell you from what I've read so far what the dose is to the smoker and whether or not or what the risk is, right? Because there's no such thing as zero risk. We talk about that in the nuclear industry all the time, but I have not been able to get to a point in my research where I could quantify the risk to the smoker, but I can tell you for sure that from what I've read, the risk in secondhand and third hand is very, very low. But I don't doubt that
We're talking about the murdered Russian.
What's that?
The Russian who was murdered,
Right.
they gave him a certain amount to kill him, right?
Yes.
Well, if you wanted to get that amount of polonium-210 by going into a smoker's home, licking third-hand smoke off their floor,
Licking it.
and you went in there every day Russian got?
Something like 13 trillion years.
3 trillion years.
3 trillion years.
Only 3 trillion. I thought you said.
Only
Oh.
3 trillion.
Only 3
And the
trillion.
universe
Yeah.
is only 10 billion years old.
Well, if
Yeah.
you believe
So
that.
you would have to sit around in our universe from beginning to end 274 times to get the dose that killed the Russian spy.
Right. I think it'd be crazy to suggest that you could get a dose that is lethal and acutely lethal from third-hand or second-hand smoke, even first-hand smoke, right? There aren't smokers who are dying of acute radiation poisoning. The question is, what is the risk that you are acquiring in terms of future long-term effects from the chronic exposure, not the acute exposure? And that's the answer that I hope to find in researching this. It's very clear, and you've made abundantly clear that this is not acute dose. You're not going to get anywhere near an acute dose. But what is the chronic dose and the elevated risk as a result of that, contributing to something like cancer in the long run?
That polonium has a half-life. If we ignore physics and pretend that the polonium simply stays in your body forever,
Right.
you will get a fatal dose after 3 trillion years of licking floors.
No, but Michael.
That's acute.
Keldin. Michael, have you done any study or thinking on terms of possible risk posed to the active smoker, like you or me, in terms of polonium-210 over our lifetimes?
No, I have not. However, it would be absurdly small.
The risk would be absurdly
I've
small.
been able to determine from my reading. So it's not come from polonium-210. There are many other elements in smoke
Oh, right.
that could contribute to cancer.
That could contribute to
Polonium-210 would likely be a very, very small part of that.
Well, I mean, the point is, most honest doctors or researchers will say that they know that, for example, that people who smoke have a higher rate of lung cancer than people who don't smoke. But they do, the mechanical cause, very few people will say they know. Am I wrong about that or right about that?
You're right. All that happens is that the probabilities change. If you walk by a window in your house and a sunbeam is coming in through the window, the sunbeam hits you as you walk by the window, your chances of dying from skin cancer have gone up.
Yes, right.
Yep.
Michael,
True.
but if you read,
Avoid all windows.
yeah, I mean the cause of why tobacco, assuming that tobacco causes cancer, which I don't assume, but I will in arguendo. Even the most honest researchers say they don't know the mechanical reason, though. Am I right in saying that most researchers say they don't know the mechanical reason?
I believe so.
When they really go, with the honest ones do.
Nobody's talking about the radiological risk in the literature anymore, right?
About tobacco
Yeah.
and cancer?
Yeah. Or are they?
I don't know, Michael.
I didn't find anything.
What's your take on that?
I didn't find anything more recent than
It had a short
2004.
This story had a short half-life, right?
Yes.
Thankfully, right?
The Russian was the Russian was poisoned in 2006.
Michael, we have to say goodbye.
Yep.
Keldin will be on the program again. We're going to go into some more details in your article. But Michael, thank you very much for calling.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Keldin, thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure as always.
And maybe a month from now we'll come on, we'll do part 2 of
Something like
polonium.
that, sure. For part 2, tune in.
Thanks for watching the smoking section. Good night. That's it.